This is Maison Frais. There's another way with Ellie Lacrosse. Create the lifestyle you want, keep the home you love, and protect your most valuable asset. Hello all. My topic for today's podcast is all about home security, safety and future-proofing our home spaces through adaptions. As we are an ageing population, the thought of being safe in our own homes becomes more paramount. We've all seen TV reports about senior people being attacked either directly or broken into to steal cash or belongings. The issues of being able to stay mobile and safe within our home or even accessing our homes is what we're going to explore today. So my guests today are husband and wife team, Chris and Zena Mortimer. Their combined knowledge of security, automated access and adaptions is second to none. Chris and Zena run Chrism Security Ltd, based in Yorkshire, with a specialist section of access and adaptions run by Occupational Therapist trained Zena. Chris has over 30 years experience in security and Zena over 11 years in OT. So welcome, Chris and Zena.
Thank you,
Probably
Ellie.
on the
Welcome,
hottest
Ellie.
day of the year so far.
It's quite nice in here.
It's beautiful in the studio, isn't it? So we're going to kick off, Chris. My first question to you is, so how do you help people with people's fears in their own home, and what are your top 3 tips to help with security?
Okay, so it's unfortunate to think that they fear either being in their own homes or fear the vulnerability of being a victim, I suppose, of crime. That's what we're talking about.
I think, you ask some people and they are almost like prisoners in their own home. I mean, the fear is worse than the actual reality, I think.
Yes.
Yeah, fortunately, that's not true for certainly the vast majority of us. We go along happily. Mm. However, for the people who have experienced an incident, that it's then that they become fearful.
My nan got broken into shortly, about a year or so before she died, and it absolutely ramped up her anxiety, and I don't think it helped her health conditions at all.
Yeah, the worst it gets is where we have had with one client is where they just couldn't go back in the home again and didn't. She lived with her mother after that, even though we put a security system in on the day after. But the trauma, what happened, she just couldn't go back to that same house.
I think people, certainly my nan, she kept having flashbacks. It took her a long time to calm down, Yeah.
So what can we do? Mm-hmm. And of course there are things we can do. Some are obvious, some are less obvious, some are quite cheap in expense, and others not so cheap, but valuable in their own right. For the cheapest, if you was looking at what can we do for the quickest, the simplest and the cheapest way of maybe securing our homes or parts of our home, I would suggest and do recommend to change the key cylinders in your doors, because as strong as the doors are, they are only as weak as the locking point. And I don't want to alarm anybody, but the key cylinders, if they are of the non-secure type, they are effectively not a lock at all. They're so easily to open.
I think they could be punched out, basically, can't they?
There are 2 ways of doing it. Obviously, not going into too much detail. But you can look it up. Bumping and cracking. Yeah. Cracking is cracking the lock cylinder, gaining access to the locking mechanism. Doesn't matter if you've got multi-point locking systems. It's all controlled from the cylinder. And then the other cylinder is to prevent the bumping. I
mean, the whole point of this, I think, is to just basically slow down the opportunist, isn't it? I think if somebody, if they're a professional kind of cat burglar and they want to really get into your home, it's the first line of defence, really, isn't it? And so many of us still keep our doors unlocked. And this time of year, how many of us have got our windows open on the ground floor?
This is it. We get complacent at any time of the year. Yeah. Of course, in the summer, we do leave windows open and doors open. So the risk, you've got to think about your property, I suppose, as a level of risk. Yeah. If you're inside it and it's all locked up, then the risk is relatively low. If you've got all the windows open, you're in the back garden, then the risk goes up considerably, and people don't realise that.
Yeah. I mean, I've actually had somebody come up our driveway. When I was working in my downstairs office on my own, I've actually had somebody in the night, sort of early evening in the wintertime when it was dark, walk up the driveway and try the handle of the door. Fortunately, the door was locked. Now, that was a freak, because normally I don't leave the door locked until I go to bed, because I was inside the house, and I usually leave it for the dog to go in and out and things like that. And that freaked me out, you know. And I literally went into the hallway because I heard this handle going, and I literally saw a jacket disappearing at the end of the driveway, and I thought, cheeky monkey.
Cheeky monkey, is that what you thought?
No, it wasn't, but I can't repeat it on air.
There are ways, though, aren't they, of alerting that somebody's on your drive.
There are. So what you've hit on there is two things. We all think about the security of our homes, the perimeter being doors and windows. But with today's technology, we're moving or adding to that, and we're looking at external detection. So the idea there is to be notified of someone in your premises, in your grounds, if you like, your outer space. So you can be notified of that before if they are intent on committing a crime, before they get to that point, you've been made aware.
A heads up, basically.
So going back to the simple, let's say 3 little simple things you can do. That's the key cylinder change. External lighting is always good. It's good for your normal use of the property in winter times anyway, but it's certainly good as when you see a light come on outside. Yes, it's the dog or it's the cat. It just might not be on one occasion. So, and the third one would be the so obvious one, is to lock your doors. And so many people just don't lock the doors.
But there's this old school, there's the senior generation. They lived at a time when it was a thing to leave it unlocked, wasn't it?
Yes.
And then I've thought of 3 more things you can do to, again, secure your home. But they're not as cheap, and they're obvious these days. So that's CCTV. It's an intercom system. You've got your locks on your doors. You've got strong doors now, these composite and UPVC doors, multi-point locking points. But they are not strong at all. If somebody knocks on the door and you go to the door and open it and say, hello.
We are the weakest link, aren't we?
Everybody does. So a simple audio intercom allows you to stay in your room or wherever the handset is. You can answer the door. You can quite politely say no, thank you. You don't have to go to the door. You don't compromise your security, and you don't let all the cold air in and the warm air out.
True.
And it's a simple one. And after that, again, the most obvious one is what I call an intruder alarm system, what most people might call a burglar alarm system.
Burglar alarm system. And unfortunately, they go off regularly down our street, and I completely ignore them, if I'm honest.
Well, they always go off for a reason. Now, whether that's a legitimate intrusion, accidentally, or there's some issue with the system, they only go off for a reason. They don't just suddenly decide, I'm going to go off today because it's a nice day. So when you have these more advanced systems, they do need servicing. You paid for them for a reason. You want them to do what they need to do when they need to do it. It's important. So if they're going off for no reason, they do need looking at. So service contracts for that. The beauty of the old and the new and the new systems now is that we can integrate them so much. And of course, with mobile phones,
the use of smart tech, it's wonderful. I think
it's been a game changer. It really has been a game changer. If you going back to what we said, you've got external detection. So you're now sat in your home or in the garden, or you're 20 miles, 200 miles, or the other side of the world. If somebody then encroaches onto your outside space, you can now be notified of that. The next obvious thing is look on your cameras on your mobile phone. So you can now see, it's like you're your own monitoring station.
And I think when we're talking about seniors, if you're an adult child and the parent is living at home and they're starting to fail a little bit, that gives an enormous peace of mind.
It's some control.
It's some sort of control,
children.
Isn't it? And also it's just an early warning system, and you can think, right, that's not right. I'm going to call mum now and just give her the heads up.
Yes.
I mean, definitely. I'm thinking of that for my own mum in the future, because I'm a good 2-hour drive away from my mother. And just to have that extra layer of,
That peace of mind.
Yeah.
Isn't it? Yeah.
I get one thing I do talk about a lot of is security systems. The word security, even before it goes further, people start thinking of crime.
Yeah.
Today's systems, they have evolved. We use the internet, like I've mentioned. We can integrate them more, so they don't necessarily have to meet the needs for security. It's other things, monitoring, and the nicer things of life. If it just means looking outside because you haven't got windows, a camera can be a virtual window. It can change how you use your property, if you like, in bungalows, or you can't get out anymore.
Oh,
You
right,
used to
I
be
see
able
what you're
to.
saying, yeah.
To use it as a visual aid rather than for security.
I hadn't thought about it in that way, but it does tie in with the sort of new science of what we call neuroaesthetics, and it's this marrying of smart technology with spaces.
Yes.
So with interior designers and stuff, we're all talking about neuroaesthetics, but that is definitely an aspect of it, you know.
With all this technology, there's always an outside, and as much as we love our English weather, whether it's hot or cold or snowy or rainy, there's always that to look at. Now, imagine if you lived in a house with no windows. It would be strange, it would be odd.
Oh, it'd be like a cell, wouldn't it? It'd be horrid.
So a CCTV system can give you
A window onto the world.
a window into the outside world,
Yeah.
so it can be useful in that respect. Also, on a not security base, going back to what you've just touched on, with the intruder alarm systems now, forget the word intruder, just think about what it can do. So a detector in a home can notify your mobile if somebody walks in front of it any time of day. Doesn't set any bells off. It just tells you that somebody's moved in that room. It can also tell you if nobody's moved in that room within a set period. That could be 2 hours
Yeah,
or
so
4
if
hours.
somebody has a set routine and suddenly there's no
Movement.
movement in the kitchen at 11 o'clock when they normally have a
Yes.
coffee, then that's alarm bells, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah, you can see where I'm going with it. It suddenly opens itself up to all sorts of things you can do, especially if you've got elderly people living at home. They do need some support and they do need looking after, even if it's just a phone call, a daily phone call. Other than that, they're fine. They're not driving anymore, say, but they're in their own home and they're happy to do that.
And it's that extra level of almost domiciliary care, isn't it? You know, because if they're not going into a care home and their family home is their main domicile, then it's just, again, it's another level of surveillance and monitoring and support.
Surveillance is a strong word.
Yes, surveillance is a strong word, but in its truest sense, I think, because you are surveilling the spaces and making a judgment call on how to react to that.
Yes.
Yeah, but you're not necessarily viewing.
No, not in a
homes. You're
not in a voyeuristic sense.
You're not looking at it in that respect. The detectors don't monitor who is or what they're doing. No. It's just that you can, let's say, a hallway. If your elderly parents haven't moved in and out of the hallway within 4 hours, you might think that's strange. Now, when my dad died, I was the one that found him, and he'd been dead for about 3 days, certainly 2 to 3 days. And it's a shock. But my dad didn't need me ringing up every day. He was driving, he was out and about, he was a busy chap. But let's say if I'd have just had that one detector in there, just because I could, and notify me just in case nobody moves in, that one detector for 5 or 6 hours. Yeah. And I could just ring my dad up. Are you okay? But if he didn't answer,
it would have narrowed that window of opportunity, wouldn't it? You know.
Yeah, it would have. And my dad wasn't vulnerable in any way. So if you have got elderly parents who you would like just to make sure that they're moving around, then
going about their daily business,
and they don't know, they wouldn't need to. It's not you're not spying on your parents.
I would have to sell this to my mother, because I think she'd think I was like getting an eyeglass onto her life, you know, and her sort of TV watching and stuff. I can imagine the conversation. It's like, you're not spying on me.
It's not Big Brother.
No. But couching it in terms of like it's just an early
safety.
warning system. Yeah, it's an early warning
Safety.
system for the family, isn't it? Yeah. I get that totally. You know?
So it's just making it usable for all. As we move on in the years and technology carries on improving with internet, we can send more data, faster data.
Yeah.
So these systems are only going to become more and more apparent.
Well, they're going to be more intuitive, I think, aren't they? They're going to be very intelligent and very kind of bespoke to your own lifestyles. So it's not going to be a sledgehammer to hit a nut. I think it's going to be very finely tuned data that's gathered in the home.
I mean, if you've got an intruder alarm system, you've got the kit there anyway.
Yeah.
Going back to what we said earlier, if you sat in your front garden on a gorgeous day like this, if you had an intruder alarm system, then you can have door chime on the external beams or external detection. You can have door chimes on the door. So when you said you don't always lock your door, let's say we don't always lock our door. However, if somebody then were to open it, then we get notified in the home by a nice DDoS sound.
Yeah.
And you look at your partner and you say, "Who's that?
Yeah.
Who's coming?"
Yeah.
And in most cases, it's somebody it's a member of family.
Yeah.
But it's such a powerful thing to know that when your door is open by means other than yourself, you just question, who's that?
Yeah.
Well, imagine that when you've got external detection and it goes DDoS when you're in the home.
Definitely.
At 3:00 in the morning.
Yeah.
And then it's not cats, dogs, foxes or badgers because these detection devices allow for that. So you know it's somebody, and
it's a human being rather than an animal. Yeah.
And we've spent quite a few early mornings shouting through the window,
testing it out.
Yes.
Asking people
Catching
to
people.
please go away
from my drive.
Yeah.
And I am not kidding. It's almost on average once a month.
Really? Yeah.
Where people we call them night walkers because
it's creepy.
they walk in at night.
But they don't worry us.
They don't worry us because we are aware. We can control the situation and we can do all that from our bedrooms.
Yeah.
What we don't want to have to do is go downstairs, open the door, run out, full of adrenaline.
Yeah.
Because I get why people want to do that, but trust me, it's the worst.
Or my nan was the other way. She became very afeared to even open the door, and at night time that was the worst anxiety for her, and she was constantly laying there thinking, "What if?"
Yeah.
So then she couldn't sleep.
Yeah.
Of course, that just drove the anxiety even deeper.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, we want with these systems, we want to get rid of that. We want people to just be comfortable, to not think about crime, basically, to be comfortable in the homes, not have to think about crime, not be worried about it. Yeah. Now, whether that's something that they themselves have done, they've got some systems in there, or they've changed something, or it's something a member of family has done for them, or an organisation, they'll get used to just being in the homes and just living their home normally. And like I say, with intelligent systems, if they don't lock the door, then somebody somewhere can be notified that door isn't locked.
Yeah.
And then at that time of night, a quick phone call. Hello, it's just me. Only it's 7:00 and you've not locked your door, have you?
Yeah. And then they'll think, "Thank you, my nagging son."
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, you're always going to get that.
Yeah.
So that's just part of human nature.
But worth it.
Yeah.
What's the worst thing that can happen though?
Yeah.
So we're trying to offset that.
You are. You're heading things off, aren't you? Really, you're just
Yes.
you're taking a sort of risk assessment, and you're just putting things in place that can just maybe tip the balance in your favour. Really, so that's great. Okay, so what got you into security in the first place, Chris?
I think from a child I used to mess around with wires and batteries and little motors. There was a shop in Sheffield called Redgates. It was the mecca of toys.
Was it?
The best toy shop.
It's even knocked down now, it's gone, but I used to love it as a child. So there was always something about wires and batteries and movement.
Yeah.
So when I left school, I became an electrician because I'll tell you, in the 1970s, there wasn't really, the term intruder alarm wasn't really said. And
I don't remember anybody down our street having intruder alarms.
No, they didn't.
At all.
And then when they did start, sort of early 80s.
And then they went off every 5 seconds.
Well,
it
yeah,
seemed.
they were a key switch. They were key on, key off.
And they
then,
always went off, didn't they, when the neighbour was on holiday?
Yeah, then they got advanced and went key on, key off, key bedtime. And that's all it was. And that's because the electronics at that time were limited. Once microprocessors came along, we were allowed to fit timers onto boards and do a lot more with it. So the intruder alarm market then started to take off big time. But I was an electrician at that time, doing electrical things, rewiring houses, central heating. I've changed from one company to another company, and they merged with another company and they did access control in the banks, the NatWest and TSB banks.
Yeah.
They were based in Bolton. They needed another engineer. So it was between me and my friend at the time. And
All's fair in business. Level
Yes.
it was for me, but my friend obviously knew what was going off, and he tried to sway things his way, which people saw through that. So I got the job.
Fabulous.
Fantastic company car. Yeah. I had to go to Bolton every day, which in somebody else's car wasn't a problem. But that was my intro into access control, and from an electrician to access control, and then cameras, and intruder alarms. It was much more fascinating than being an electrician.
Oh, see.
So I'd have to say now, after 30 years, it's security.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously I am an electrician, 4-year apprenticeship, so I know all that. However, the industry, in its technical sense, has changed so much. So I've not kept up with that.
It has, hasn't it? And as I say, the digital age has really boosted, electrical engineering processes and applications, hasn't it?
Yes.
Well, it's all getting intermingled now. So the electricians are doing security. Security can't do electrical, but they might be doing something, another sort of installation,
Well,
whereas they wouldn't have done.
It's a supportive role maybe as part of it, isn't it?
They are interfacing with each other. The electrical. A good example of that is automated homes. Those systems. So you can turn your lights on and off
the
by
smart
pressing
home
buttons.
systems.
The smart homes. And you can also operate your gates, your automated gate. You can interface with your intruder alarm system, with your CCTV. So there's a lot of people now doing what were separate industries, which are now mingling. Yeah. Certainly on the domestic market, they are mingling into one-ish sort of a package. Yeah. Commercially, there's still very much of a difference when it comes to commercial
it's a lot
systems,
more complex, isn't it? With lots more complex needs, really, on a commercial scale of things.
So the winners are the homeowners, because they're benefiting from how these systems.
I think it's
could
an
help us.
exciting time, certainly for seniors, and the seniors are definitely driving the voice-activated controls with some of this technology. And I know certainly my mum, I mean, she's not going to be wanting to get a tablet and tap away on it. She just wants to talk to it.
Yeah, it's a lot easier option than a tablet
once
or
it's
a computer.
set up. I mean, it's like a car. I don't understand how a car works. I'm not bothered. I turn the key and the car fairy takes care of everything.
I want to know what colour it is.
I want to know what colour, whether it matches my hair, and whether I've got enough fuel in it to get home. Do you know what I mean? But I don't need to understand how it works to be able to use it. And that's the same analogy, I think, with senior people. They will adopt this smart home technology that's all integrated with security systems if they can just talk to the darn things. They don't want to be tapping away, and they can't see close anyway, and their fingers probably don't work very well because of arthritis. So being able to talk to the devices is definitely the growth area in the industry, I think.
So who installs those? I mean, I think we know what we're talking about, which systems they are, and the person that installs those are the family themselves. It's literally a plug and play item. So
and that's what we want.
So it is. That's why the winner is the homeowner that can buy off the shelf, plug it in, and off they go. And other systems, because that's still in its early stage. They're talking to a box on the table and it doing things, because that's one item in the home. There's not many items that can interface with that at the moment, but there will be.
Oh, there will be, and they're being designed to do that. Yes. You've got other systems are available, but you've got your Google, you've got your Amazon, and you've got your Apple systems. And you go to any Currys nowadays, and as soon as you walk in the store, it's like a shrine to those three giant tech companies, isn't it? Yeah. And they use their little home devices as the foot in the door to be able to sync with all these other goods that they're going to try and flog into us in the future.
There is that. This evolved, from British Gas, because they developed a wireless thermostat.
Oh, I didn't realise that.
The Hive.
Oh, of course, we've got a Hive.
And from the wireless thermostat, they sort of developed the idea that other things can be wireless. Yeah. And it was them that pushed it. So the security market, to be honest, they wasn't there at the time, they had to do a bit of catching up.
Yeah, so they're a bit slow off the mark.
So you've got people like British Gas now doing intruder alarms and adding all these wireless detectors. So the rest of the intruder security market sort of just pricked up and then did their best very quickly to get systems out there. So it has driven the market, and now it's commonplace. It's very difficult to see where this is all going with the phone and transmission of data, and all the things that you can do with it. And do you know what's going to change it? I've always said this. What will change it massively is the technology in batteries.
Yes,
because a lot of wireless things rely on battery.
And I know the British government are trying to position themselves post-Brexit for developing battery technology. We want to be leading the world in that, and I think that's a good thing.
Well, what's going to push that on, of course, is the automobile industry.
Electric cars.
Electric cars.
Yeah.
We've recently bought a caravan, and
Sorry, I won't hold that against you.
no, but obviously our thought is, how is the electric car going to pull the caravan?
Yes.
And I actually thought, well, they'll redesign the caravans to make the base of the caravan full of batteries.
Yeah, they will. So it'll be, they won't get that drag and that friction, and they'll understand about, and maybe as it drives along, it'll recharge the batteries as well. So
yes.
They say you can't really see the technology in 30 years' time, or most of the jobs created through technology haven't been thought of yet. It's this sort of unwritten rule, which is encouraging. Now, whether I'll be around in 30 years' time,
that's the thing.
It's not quite so encouraging.
I mean, we've got Tesla to thank for a lot of opening that up. I mean, he's invested so much in developing like battery farms very quietly in the UK. Because it is that charging end of the process that is the limiter, isn't it?
Yes, definitely.
And some farmers are selling off their fields and erecting big sheds, but inside it's humming with batteries.
Yes. Yes.
And I mean, seriously, Tesla's developing a new saloon car that's going to be released in the autumn in the UK, and it will match any top range saloon car. And I'm thinking, well, maybe our next car.
Electric. Formula.
Yeah.
Whatever it is, Formula Electric, Formula E. Yeah. That's going to drive it massively because there's so much competition.
He's going to go for the company car market and the fleet car market, and then it'll grow from there.
Yeah.
Then there's a massive industry on car charging points. It's like for disability. Not too long ago, if you had a wheelchair, you were lucky.
Yeah.
But some of these motor scooters, some of these powered scooters for access, unbelievable. They're not cheap.
No, they're not cheap, and they've got go faster stripes on some of them.
And they can go a long time and carry quite a weight. They're not restricted in any way. So again, on the disability home domestic market, they need charging points for those. If they can't get it in the house, or they need
that's usually a problem.
An area to plug it in.
That's usually a problem with them.
It's all good, and people should be well encouraged from security and accessibility side.
Yeah, definitely. And that leads us really nicely, segueing wonderfully. He's a pro, isn't he? Yeah. So now we're going to turn to you, Zena. All right, with your OT hat on. So what sort of adaptions do people need as they lose mobility? And what happens if they're not eligible for some of these government assistances, and how can they be helped to stay active in their own home?
Right, so that's a big question.
It is a big question.
Start
we'll
with.
Break it down.
Break it down, So we'll start simple, like Chris did, really. So if you're in your own home, your mobility has a slight impairment, you're starting to struggle to step up your couple of steps into your house. So you could start with just looking at rails and grab rails. You can have a wall-to-floor rail, grab rails at the front door, grab rail just inside as you go into the hallway to steady yourself. You can either pay for these yourself, or you can get help with this.
Is it means tested? Is it still means tested?
For rails in Sheffield, no, you have to make a referral, which you can do yourself.
I find that really surprising, because we are living in a very hilly part of the country,
yes,
aren't we?
Yes.
And it's almost necessary,
It is restricted. You can make a referral to Equipment and Adaptations in Sheffield, and you will be assessed either by an occupational therapist or an occupational therapist assistant to see whether they can meet your needs with putting a rail at your front door. but they do assess your function. So if you're still quite mobile and they think, well, you're not really at risk, then you might have to pay for that yourself.
Right. Okay.
Which it's not very much. Rails are quite cheap, and really your family can fit those as well. Right. So that for this simple
They're not
grab
too technical,
so
are they?
Simple
really?
grab rails. When you start talking about wall to floor rails, it depends what your family, or what businesses they do, because it would need bending a rail. So I think perhaps your local handyman, or there is some schemes. There's various schemes that you could apply to this Stay Put in Sheffield, which will do it at a reduced rate.
Oh, that's useful.
And there's other, if you've been in the forces, there's there's a link there for funding. So there's various little bits of funding that you perhaps could link into. So starting off with rails, say accessing your home. Then when you go into your home, it's then accessing all your rooms. And sometimes, especially in Sheffield, like you said, we've got terraced houses. And again, you've got a step down into your kitchen, or another step, or a few steps, or 6 steps could be to your back garden.
Yeah. I mean, that's the major trip hazard in this region, isn't it?
It's just, unfortunately, that's just what we have to cope with in Sheffield. So rails are really essential. If you start to be unsteady, then you need to get rails in there. But obviously then you've got to look at stairs. Now stairs, you can start off with putting a second handrail, or again applying to see whether you qualify to get one put in free. So 2 handrails can make you quite steady on the stairs. But then if you do deteriorate, then you're looking at a stair lift probably. So say if it's something like arthritis and got bad hips and knees, then a stair lift would be a good option for you. Again, you can apply to equipment and adaptations in Sheffield, but they have similar schemes all around the country to be assessed to see whether you could get a grant or part of a grant, a disabled facilities grant, towards that.
I think if you're on other sorts of benefits, it's almost a gateway. You'd probably be almost guaranteed to get something.
Yeah, so like guarantee pension credit is like a passport. So it does vary with people. The gap we've got in the market really is the younger people, the under 65s that's perhaps got one of you still working. It might be only a low paid job. You still might end up having a contribution. It's the government's way of assessing for
you're
for
definitely
a grant.
within the cracks there, aren't
yes,
you?
Yeah. So unfortunately, you probably would have part of that cost to pay, or even full payment, and you could be talking. For a straight stair lift, perhaps about £2,500, or for a curved one, £5,000 or £6,000. So it's quite a big investment.
It is an investment, but then you have to think, what are the alternatives?
This is it, and it keeps you accessing all of your home. So you can access your bedroom, you can continue with normal life, accessing your bathroom and your bedroom. So then your bathroom, obviously, that's another slips and trips area.
Oh, the amount of properties that I go into, and they still have ceramic tiles on the floor, and I'm like, oh my gosh, that's just a cracked hip waiting to happen.
Yes, so there's lots and lots of nice non-slip floor coverings that you can put in your bathroom to start off with. And if you want to carry on accessing your bath, you can have things like a shower board that fixes across your bath that you can sit on and lift your legs over into the bath and take a shower sat down safely. But obviously that's only going to last for so long. Then you need to start thinking of removing your bath and turning it into a wet room. Now, wet rooms have got more trendy lately.
They have, and it makes me laugh because some people say wet room, and what they just mean is a shower with a screen, and actually a true wet room has nothing in it.
No, really.
And why doesn't it have something in it?
Because if you put a screen up, that's obviously it's limiting the access to that showering space, and you've got to think about that space lasting you forever. Like we're talking about your home's lasting forever. So you've got to think about, you might not be actually walking into that space. You might be being pushed in a shower chair, in a wheeled shower chair into that space, and have the help of a carer to shower you. So putting a screen there can cause it to be very restricted and an unusable space eventually.
I mean, that's a lot of money to pay for not being able to access it.
So my advice would be to get a proper wet room or level access shower, and to go for curtains, and to have a really large amount of space for that shower space. And also I'd advise as well, because a lot of people go for rain showers, because they love them, but obviously that's not practical when you're a carer showering somebody, and I've been there rolling my trousers up.
You need
paddling.
to direct it, don't you?
Yes, yeah. So you could always have it, obviously if there's more than one of you living there, you can always have a rain shower with an attachment that comes off that you can shower, or you can direct into a sitting position if you're sat on a chair or in a WC shower chair to shower in. So that makes it a lot safer. To take that step further about accessing both levels of your house, if things move on and you might be in a wheelchair or possibly going to be in a wheelchair in the future, then a through floor lift would be something that you'd be looking at.
Yeah, I mean, in preference, on my sort of property side of things, I always encourage people to go for those rather than the stair lifts, because firstly, I don't like stair lifts. I have to put my hands up. I have a natural prejudice against them, because I know as an investor, when I go to properties, that's the first thing I rip out.
Yes.
And then that's like several £1,000s to replace the whole stairwell, and it's, starting again. So I'm always thinking, oh no, they've just knocked about 10 grand off the price of the property,
I think
whereas the lifts, they can be obfuscated from outside and kind of hidden a little bit, but they just make life a lot easier for people with mobility inside,
Well, with usually what the through floor lifts that I've been involved in are the ones that are inside. It's not a shaft; it's just a carriage that goes from one room to another. So it means cutting out a space in the ceiling and just putting it in, and then it just travels from one floor to another. Lots of safety features on as well, because people worry about getting crushed when it's actually coming down, but they've all got safety features on now to stop. So if a child or animal went underneath, it would stop. There's a safety stop. Yes, there's a safety stop on it. So
and in terms
of
of cost, just generally, what's the difference between, say, like a stair lift and one of these internal lifts?
So in general, a through floor lift would be £10,000 or £11,000. But as I said, that would cover you for a long time. The other things to consider is the size of wheelchair you have or that you might be getting, and that's when an occupational therapist, having an assessment from them, really comes into action, because just putting a random through floor lift in may not cover your needs for the rest of the years.
You only want to do this once.
Yes.
And also you've got to have a mind on what happens when you move out of that property, or family have got to sell that property. If it's too adapted for that particular person's needs, is a younger family going to be able to use that and make use of it? Whereas if it's a little bit more generous or a little bit more universal, maybe that's going to be a useful thing for a growing family later on down the line.
People do look for ready adapted properties to buy, and I think that's something that's going to develop more and more
for sure.
with estate agents.
Yeah,
I think we're going to be seeing more and more adapted properties for sale. With just going back to the stair lift, it probably does depend on who you get to fit and unfit a stair lift as well, because there should be little damage if it's done properly. So again, it's getting somebody that's reputable, that's known for removing stair lifts as well.
And you have good inroads there, don't
you?
With a lot of contacts and stuff.
Quite a lot. Yes. So there are a lot of companies out there that are professional and do it as a regular part of their service. Yeah. So it's accessing the right person really to do that, to cause the least disruption to that property really.
So if somebody's mobility is failing, what do you reckon gives them most return on their investment to future-proof them staying in their own home?
I think access is definitely a big one. So like we just mentioned about rails, the next step would be looking at ramping. Yeah. Again, you can be assessed for that. But if you might be thinking about, I'm future-proofing it, I'm not there, I'm not really ready for it, but I know it's something I'm going to be using, and it's going to make my life a lot easier having a ramp, then there's lots of options out there. So you can go for the old-fashioned concrete ramp. It's got to apply to building regulations, of
I was
course.
gonna say, building control.
So again, it's getting somebody reputable or getting an OT in there to assess and recommend. And also there's portable ramps. If you've just got 1 or 2 steps and it's and you don't really want to make a big impact on the look of your house, there are portable ramps that you can put down. There's different sizes for different heights.
Right.
So you've got to the usual, the building regs is 1 in 12.
Yes.
You can get away with a bit more with a portable ramp if you've got somebody assisting you.
Right. Okay.
But I wouldn't really recommend it if you were on your own.
On your own.
Yes. Yeah. I'd be going probably for a semi-permanent ramp, which is a steel modular ramp, which it is what it says. It's a modular ramp that just screws down to the ground, so it can be removed after or moved to another property as well.
Useful.
Which is a really handy tip. So they've got a more longevity in that, in having those kind of ramps. People do build wooden ramps, but they tend to be not as safe.
And also if they're not maintained, they can be quite dangerous, I think. Yeah.
So, they can rot and they can be slippy as well.
I was going to say the slippy, certainly in the winter time.
Yes.
Not so great. So it's not good as you're going down in a wheelchair to have a slippy ramp.
So yes, I'd be recommending a concrete ramp or one of these steel modular ramps, really. And it varies. It's hard to say prices because it varies on how big they need to be to meet the height of your access, really.
In terms of your training as an occupational therapist, what are the key things you look at people's lifestyle and their... I mean, explain to people, because I couldn't explain exactly what you do. So if you can just in a few words say what you actually do. Yeah.
So first of all, we look at the person's function. It's how they function. It's what conditions they've got. And then it's our knowledge how they're going to develop. Sometimes, we can't predict totally how things are going to be, but we can have a good idea of how that condition's going to develop and what the needs are going to be, really. It's I think it's really important to plan ahead with certain conditions, especially things like if you have MS. It's you know that's going to progress, so it's about planning for the future and not waiting for a crisis to happen,
which is what we often do, isn't it?
Yes, I think that's it. And then secondly, so we look at the person and their function, and then we look at their environment and how we can make that environment better. So it can be like just simple things, right? Rails or taking rugs up that are tripping hazards.
Yes, yeah.
I'm sure you've experienced that, Ellie.
Yeah.
And making sure doorways are clear and there's not too much furniture to cause tripping hazards again, because lots of coffee tables and side tables.
Looking at the flow of the plan.
Yes.
Yeah.
As again, I think you probably look at that kind of thing.
Definitely, and also people, their ocular vision, the distinction between the decor and say the doorways. Sometimes it needs to be quite distinct, doesn't it?
Yes. So that's another thing where I suppose you can come in as well, about thinking about colours, the colours you use for your decoration to make sure that doorway stands out.
It needs a real good contrast, doesn't it?
Yeah. And floor covering as well. Carpets can be really, really difficult if you're pushing somebody in a wheelchair or a wheeled shower chair, a wheeled commode. So perhaps looking at changing floor coverings to make that easier for the carer, not just yourself. And
also thinking about your internal spaces is to have enough space so that maybe a carer can stay overnight sometimes, or or an extra family member can help with the care.
Yes, so it's adapting your space to make it functional and also a good space for your carers to work in as well. And I know everybody likes to collect things and loves the favourite furniture that's been passed down from granny and everything, but sometimes I think we've just got to think that, to make it easier and less of a risk of getting around your property.
Although I've just recently taken on a new client, and they absolutely adamant that some of their antique furniture has got to go into the new plan, but they've also been told that these things will help stabilise memories from one of the partners who's got dementia.
Yeah.
So that it's very familiar.
Yeah.
It's part of their surroundings, So it is walking that tight line really between form and function, isn't it?
It is. You can't make everybody
No.
throw everything out and start again.
Yeah, that's great.
But yes, we look at the person, we look at the environment, and then we look at what solutions we can come up with that's going to be best for them.
Yeah. Okay, so my final question to the pair of you actually is, what's it like working together?
It's fine.
Okay.
We're both going in the same direction. We're both wanting to do what we want to do together.
Yeah.
In sort of blunt terms of I do security, Zena does occupational therapy.
But there is an overlap.
Oh, gosh,
There
yes. Yeah,
there is a kind of a meshing of the two.
And I think it's that
disciplines.
access.
And that's what we both feel. It's much nicer to be able to offer somebody a better lifestyle than it is to give
in
them
a more holistic way,
Yes.
which is what Maison Frais is all about, is looking at the client holistically and drawing all these skills and professions and trades together to help provide the solutions to some of people's problems.
It's nice to get the feedback from that rather than just go there and fit a lock or a camera, which they like, but you don't get that feedback. And typically how we manage the service together, I'll give you one example. We do automated doors, or we automate existing doors,
right?
Specifically for wheelchair and scooter users.
Yeah.
And the need for that comes from an occupational therapist who's assessed what needs for the client, and then we'll physically look at, well, what can we do to this door? So it's a great marry of an occupational therapist and me getting together, two completely different sort of disciplines, and then coming out with a solution which then benefits somebody after that.
I think it can only help, definitely.
I think that's it. So we'll, we can assess for a ramp and get a ramp in there. You can automate the door, but then you can also automate doors internally as well.
Yeah.
So it's not just an external door that you can automate, because obviously sometimes you've got a door quite close to the front door, and you can't shut that, have that door shut on you and be locked in a small lobby. So it expands into the, all the inner doors as well as the property.
It's really good.
Going back to your question, we are more of a team.
Sorry.
More of a team pulling our resources together. So in that respect, working together, it's like a little work environment.
It is good. It's a team.
You're great as a team, and also you've got specific roles. And what I found when I worked with my husband on my other business is that we had to find our roles quite quickly because we were stepping on each other's toes.
Yes. Yeah.
And we had some big rows, and it's like, no, well, actually, you're very good at that. You're very good at this. Let's just ne'er the twain shall meet, and that way we keep it all harmonious,
Yes.
But if you try second guessing what I've already guessed, then, it's not going to work.
The end result is you want it to work.
Yeah.
So obviously you don't agree on everything.
No.
Of course you don't.
No.
And one
But
of
then
those
the lines of communication are going to work quite quickly, aren't they? So
yeah, and it never ends. Yeah, I mean, obviously, if we were at a restaurant, we'd be talking about work.
Yeah, that is the occupational hazard, isn't it?
But it's not work. It's we like doing it, so why not? And that's where our creative side comes out when we're going out, and then it's
that's
just
fantastic. So. Happy team. This is what we like to hear. So thank you both very much for coming along today.
Thank you, Ellie.
And, I'm glad you've enjoyed that. So I'd love to have you back on again at some point in the future and to chat further about what you do, because I think it's fascinating, and it marries very well with the whole Maison Frais kind of ethos as well. So thank you.
Thank you, Ellie.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.